So hello and welcome to the Bleeding Keyboard. With me today, I have got the incredibly talented Anthony Briscoe. Am
Thank
I
you
right
very
with
much.
Anthony or is it Anthony?
It's Anthony, but no one calls me that by my granddad, and he's dead, so no one calls it me.
Right. In that case, yeah, I'm not going to break with President. I've got the incredibly talented Anthony Briscoe, who is genuinely awesome. Anthony, first question: which genre do you write in, and how do you define that genre?
So really, it's poetry, but the way I approach it really is I write it more like a script than I do an actual poem because I'm a performance poet and my background's theatre. So I write essentially like a mini play, knowing exactly like where I'm going to move and what it looks like poetry, but I always annotate it and do different bits around it so I know where I'm going at. If there's a gag in it or a joke, I try and at least highlight that for myself, knowing at this moment it's just a punchline. So stuff like that.
So, if you're saying it's like a mini play, does that mean that you're actually treating the audience as though they're a pathetic fallacy, as though they're another member of the cast within that play?
Sort of. I always see it as more of like an extension of what I'm doing. So I try and bring them in. So the idea is like when I do my performance stuff, the audience, I end up trying to break the fourth wall quite often with them to have them
Yeah.
part of the performance too. So I want them to feel A, awkward because it's funny, and B, sort of I want them to feel that I'm not with you, I'm not just there. Do you know what I mean? That sort of
Yeah.
situation.
So that must take one hell of a lot of improvisational skills. I suppose the teaching, the background in theatre helps an awful lot with that, since you have to cope with different audiences. Since as you can, yeah, two nights doing the same show, you can have two completely different audiences, can't you?
Absolutely. Sometimes a joke that I do goes down amazingly well at one night, and
Yep.
then the next night in the same venue, same situation, same vibe, doesn't work at all. It's how it's just how people react to it, and I find that the most exciting part of more than anything because I like to work hard at it. So like when it gets hard, that's the bit I enjoy. That's the hard part.
Yeah, it's that satisfaction of, do you know what? I could have just sort of like gone out there and said roses are red, violets are blue, but instead I've just yeah pulled it back from the precipice.
Yes, exactly.
Um, Brilliant. So yeah, so poetry with that aspect of script writing in it. Yeah, I do like that. What's your writing schedule?
As and when. So I'm one of those. So when I remember growing up, and a lot of people were saying stuff like, "Oh, well, I always have a notepad on me, and I write down this, that, and the other." Yeah, it's true. Now it's a phone. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
sometimes just be not doing anything, and I'll think of something. I'll go, "All right, that's a funny line," or like. So I try and do it a lot like comedy, I suppose. So like when I'm at work or I'm in public and something funny happens, I'll make a note of it and then try and embellish it, and then how can I fit that into something? Stuff like that. Unless it's incredibly tragic, in which case don't. But like, he sort of yeah, so it's sort of stuff like that. And I I don't really like giving myself deadlines too much because I think sometimes, for example, with me having dyslexia, for example,
right.
doing that just sort of abject pressure on my brain where it's like I will immediately stop, like because it's too much in one go. So what I do is I'll write bits here, bits there, bits, and then thread it through. So it's essentially like a tapestry, and then I'll just thread it through in like and find the through line and stuff like that.
Does the dyslexia does that hamper you and your creativity?
Ironically, no. It hampered me in school growing up.
Yeah,
It's like obviously the paradigm of education in that regard is a lot of it is written and it's your written communication.
yeah,
Whereas I excel in verbal communication and performance, which is why my background's theatre. And I find that a lot of people on the neurodiverse scale, such as myself with dyslexia, a lot of people are more creative. And
yeah.
I think that's because it's a different language, it's a different communicational language. So a lot of like what I do, say for example, when taking notes, if it's like I'm in a lecture or something, I've got to take notes, is that I draw at the same time
Right.
because that picture helps me recall what was going on at the time, but also it keeps my brain constantly engaged. And sometimes when I get frustrated with not being able to write exactly what I want to write, if I've drawn it or expressed it in some other way, it's like a weight's lifted off your shoulders in that regard. That's my own personal mechanism that I've come up with since a child. Everyone's different, clearly, and obviously, but for me, that works. And I just think as long as it works for you as the individual, then it's fine. Obviously, in an educational setting, it's different. But if it comes to your own writing practices, I think there's no real. Obviously, it's a bit of like a get out clause, but what works for you is the correct thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I get exactly what you're saying. Within educational environments, everything is meant to be sort of like, it must be spelt correctly, it must be punctuated correctly, and that rigidity, it can hamper an awful lot of people. I mean, this is not me trying to blow smoke up your arse, but this it must have taken a lot out of you to sort of like still plow through to express your creativity after you're getting sort of like knocked back by people saying, "Nah, it would be good, but yeah, your writing's all to shit."
Yeah, and I've heard that quite a lot. Yeah, of course it is. But the thing about it is I've had that so often that I just use that as fuel. So one of the main things that has driven me to the point where I'm at now, obviously not major, but I'm quite happy with what I do. Is I was told by someone very close to me at the time, someone that I really loved and everything like that, that me trying to be an artist was taking the piss out of real artists, and that hurt like I can't explain it, because my entire life I've done creative things and I've been a creative, and I decided at the age of, what was it, 24, 25, I was going to just try and be an artist. Like, let's have a go, let's do it. I've been to uni, got a degree, I got a teaching degree. I can do that stuff, but I wouldn't be happy unless I actually explore the creative side of
Yeah.
life. Being told from the start, no, what a terrible idea, you're an idiot, was really hard and horrible. But I constantly, whenever I've got like a down period, going, oh, I'm not sure I can do this, I'm going, well, look where I've come now, and look where they are. I'm the happy one, so it's all right.
Wow. I mean, yeah. After we finish this interview, if you want to give me their address so I can go around and shit in their letterbox.
It's all right. It's
Yeah.
back in the day, don't worry.
Right. Yeah. And that's just reminded me. In fact, yeah, I'm just going to take us slightly off script here, because, and it'll mean that we overrun, but I don't care. One of the things that we've discussed in the past when we've been talking is that we've both got our mutual love for Rick Mail.
Yes.
Um, what is it about Rick Mail that you found so compelling as an artist?
So I've been watching Rick Mail since essentially I was born. Which is great because my dad always tells me about how he used to watch Bottom, and I was in my stroller at the time in 1991 and everything like that. So for me, he's just been a constant presence in my life. And so my dad and my mum loved the young ones, my dad loved Bottom. So Rick Mayall's always been around. I've always watched it as a kid, growing up with the slapstick humour of Bottom and the silliness of the young ones. But the more I get older, the more I appreciate the writing. And Rick Mayall has this magical thing, and I know that's a terrible thing to say, but he does. With just his face, he can just do a look, and that to me is comedy. It's brilliant, and like he can make me laugh. So whenever I'm feeling down or depressed or sad or whatever, I can just watch Rick Mayall, and immediately I'm happy again. Like, that's funny, that's brilliant, and it's because as well, growing up, looking at how much, like, to me growing up he was just silly, daft, but now looking more into him, reading what he's written and all this sort of stuff, that man had such a genius approach to comedy and understanding of comedy and
Yeah.
writing performance, that that's why he's so good. But the most clever thing he ever did was mask it. And he had this one quote which makes me, because he did this university speech where he came up 5 points of life, the five.
It's awesome, isn't it? Yes.
It's brilliant. And I always remember, like, love is the answer is one of my favourites. I think that's the last one, that's the fifth one. But then he also came up with another quote which was amazing, which was, I might be an idiot, but if me being an idiot helps people forget the grimness of modern life, then I'm happy. And I've never heard anything that described how I approach my performance as well. So it's like I'm happy to play the fool on stage. That's why I try and make people laugh. It's because I know what it's like to not laugh. And laughter is massively important to me, and that's because I've grown up watching him. So I got that from him.
Yeah, completely agree. His autobiography is probably one of my favorite autobiographies of all time. I think it's called uh, it's Bigger Than Hitler, Better Than Christ.
Yeah, so I've read that in public several times when I'm on a train and stuff, and I will just laugh, and I have a very loud laugh. So I am literally just laughing at pages on a train, and I think, yeah, great, because it's really funny. It's really funny.
It really is, and it's probably one of the best uses of footnotes I have ever seen. Maybe Good Omens is sort of like alongside it, but yeah, that one, just a footnote. Yeah, sorry for the distraction. I just, yeah,
Always happy to talk. Always happy.
which is most important to you? Is it plot or character?
Oh, that's a hard one. For me, I love a good plot personally because I need to be taken on a journey. I need to go from point A to point B. I like that. And if the plot is weak, I can deal with it, but it's just dull. And I can just like, so for me, I think most Marvel films are rubbish because of that problem, because a lot of their plots are cookie cutter because their films are manufactured studio lines.
Yeah.
So a lot of so the characters are always the characters. Stan Lee's characters will always be great. You can have a great character, but if the plot's rubbish and the plot's dull, doesn't matter. It dampens a character. So like you can have like the best character ever in anything, but if you put him in like I don't know Reader's Digest, it ain't exactly going to set the world on fire. Do you know what I mean? It's so I like
Yeah.
plot.
Right, so that's plot with the slight edge over character. Yes. Yeah, I can get on board with that. What piece of writing advice would you give to anybody who's just starting out?
Your writing's valid. It's very simple. You're going to start out and you're going to start writing bits and bats, and immediately you're going to put it against other things, and that's natural. That's normal. But it's your work. It's your words. Don't lose sight of that. That's your creative output, and it's just as valid as anyone else's creative output. And yeah, okay, so there's a lot of stuff that we have to do with, like, so say, for example, in performance and stuff, for me and my poetry and that, there's always going to be competition. There's always going to be people you think are better than you. You're always going to think, oh, I wish I was up there with them. Fine, use that, but that doesn't diminish your own work. That doesn't diminish what your work is. And I think we conflate expression with creativity with capital gain now, and I think that's a shame. I think we think if I'm not earning money off this, or if I'm not, successful with popularity on Instagram or this, that, and the other, then I'm failing. When actually, you're not. By creating anything in the first place, you're doing the best thing you can do for yourself. You're doing like free therapy essentially for yourself. I mean, look at what we did during like Corona. During coronavirus and everything, all of a sudden the creative arts was like everyone was doing it and this, that, and the other. No matter how much the Tory government want to get rid of it, you won't. But like after everything, people started creating, people started going to crafts, baking, coming up with recipes and this, that, and the other, because creativity is a human need and it's a human, it's a human need. It's in my food, water, this creativity is up there for me. Because without it, we just become repressed and we lose what it is to be human. So because of that weightiness that I put on it, I think that any creativity is valid. Obviously, it depends on what the situation is. If you're making like Nazi propaganda, I mean, in a gallery years later, it's valid, but it's horrible. Don't do it. But you know what I mean? If you're just doing like a story, or you want to write flash fiction, or you want to do a poem, just do it. Because at the end of the day, the only person that's going to really have any value with it is yourself. So just do it.
I mean, do you know what? I agree with everything you said, but I would even take it a little bit further. And if somebody is creating Nazi propaganda because they feel that's the way for them to express their creativity, in that case, yeah, go do it. It's not something I would want to sort of like see or experience, but if it's something that makes somebody happy, in that case, yeah, I think they should go with it. I think we're all into. I'm saying that because at the moment there are lots of arguments on Twitter about TERFs and trans reactionary, and yeah, people don't seem to be allowed their own opinion about what's right. And I wouldn't like anybody to have an opinion that oppressed somebody, but at the same time, I wouldn't like somebody to have an oppression that stopped somebody having an opinion.
I think that's dialogue. Dialogue's always needed in these scenarios.
Yeah,
But I think what mainly is what's going on at this moment in time is that we're going through social change. And
yes,
social change will always have people who support it and people who will be against it.
yeah,
And especially we say something with like gender and this, that, and the other. Gender, I'm going to say, I think gender is a social construct. I think it is fluid. I think people should be allowed to choose their gender if they feel that they are somewhat. That's fine. I like to think I'm an ally.
yeah,
Trans lives are real lives. All that sort of stuff, trans rights and that. I think it's absolutely fine. So I do come down on the side of pro-trans stuff. That's fine with me.
yeah,
Doesn't bother me in the slightest. I think it's cool to have the opportunity to say, well, you don't agree with that. I think that is important as well. But I think what's happening now is that we're getting to a point where it's hard to accept it because it's so radically different to what our generations are used to.
yeah,
And the way I always think about it is like smoking, for example. Trying not to trivialize it, but smoking, for example, is like people used to smoke so much back in the day. Doctors used to prescribe it and this, that, and the other. But then we learned that it kills you and it's bad for you. You know what I mean? So like eventually society started changing and started getting onto the idea, and we still do it clearly, but like changing to the idea where we start learning these things. And say, for example, like a lot of people now say, so mental health's a massive thing for me.
yeah,
I think it's really important. And I know like there's a lot of Twitter stuff now and that where it's like, oh, everyone's got mental health issues and this, that, and the other now. Oh God, everyone's got it. And you're like, well, yeah, we do, because we've always had it. It's just now we're learning and society's coming to accept that we've progressed, we've learned something. This is
yeah.
new. And I think that's really important. And sure, yeah, dialogue's always important on that front. And I don't disagree with people's right to say what they think, but I think you need to be able to own what you say.
Yeah.
Because if not, you're just trolling, and that's not helping anything or anyone. All it's doing is letting you say something without owning it, and I think that's the problem.
Fully, absolutely, fully agree. Yeah. So, who do you read for pleasure?
Okay, so going back to if I can go back to my favourite book series that I do revisit every now and then,
Right,
it's Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events.
the brilliant.
Yeah, back in the day, it was either Harry Potter or that, and I chose A Series of Unfortunate Events. I've never been a Harry Potter fan, sadly. I've only read the first one. I read some of Goblet of Fire, and it just wasn't for me.
Yeah,
So for me, going back to that, that's like my comfort reading. Charlie Brooker, his books, I Can Make You Hate, Hell of It All, Scream Burn, Dawn of the Dumb, all them, I read them quite often as well, because Charlie Brooker is also like a writing influence for me.
yeah,
I just think it's so funny and misanthropic, and it's like brilliant. I also read a lot of non-fiction stuff, so I'm very political. You probably got that from some of my answers I just gave. But
yeah.
I'm currently reading a book called A Treatise on Humanity and Hereafter,
Right.
about possibility, and that's by, surprisingly enough, the lead singer of Enter Shikari, Rao Reynolds. And that's all about how he's written lyrics to reflect social change and social moves from their album, their newest album. I think it's called The Dreamers Hotel, isn't it? I think it is. And that's a really good book. I read a lot of like political things, like I've just read a lot of Chomsky recently, because I think it's just important to. I like learning, so I go with that. And obviously Rick Mail, I read his book quite often. So you're gonna those are my comfort reads. I also read graphic novels quite a lot, just because I like animation. I work in animation when I make stuff like that as well. And I think we keep thinking that like those things are kids' things, when I think, no, it's just imagination. It's just another form of reading. It's just another form of...
Just another form of using sign, isn't it? Within language, it's not just the spoken word, it's not just the written word, but it's also how we can convey things. I mean, one of the things from the reading lists that you suggested there, just with Lemony Snicket and Charlie Brooker alone, this sort of like shows that you love wordplay. I mean, is it Darren Handler who was the Lemony Snicket author? His love for words just comes through in every one of those books, where he sort of like explains some of the phrases and goes into detail about how the words are used. And Charlie Brooker just wrong foots you in so many different ways with what you're reading that, yeah, he nearly killed me once, did Charlie Brooker, because I was reading his review of, you know, he used to write for PC Game magazine, or one of the he went back there and they gave him a game to review, and the game was Euro Truck Driver. And he said it was the most boring thing, and they'd done it as a punishment. And he said one of the things that you get to do is you can look round the inside of the cab whilst you're driving it, and you realise that there's no one on the passenger seat and you're all alone, and it just reinforces how lonely you are. And he said you can't do any of the usual things that truck drivers do, like wanking in lay-bys, murdering prostitutes. And yeah, the way he conveys humor in a way that Jeremy Clarkson could only dream of doing. Yeah.
I was in when I was at uni. I was in like one of the computer labs doing like a sociology. I studied sociology briefly. So I was doing like an essay, and it was the time he released that whole David Cameron is a lizard thing, when it all got like a funny thing. And it wasn't the David Cameron is a lizard thing that made me laugh. It was just that he wrote, David Cameron's the kind of man to take all his clothes off to have a poo. And it floored the people just looking at me, and I was like, that is the funniest thing that you could say about David Cameron. I don't care what anyone else said. That he is a man who would take all his clothes off to have a poo.
Absolutely. So yeah, this is who we read for pleasure. We've got the same bookshelf here. Have you actually read any Terry Pratchett?
Yeah, back in the day, I read Diggers.
Have you read Good Omens? That was Pratchett Games.
Started watching it on Prime. Is that the one?
Yeah, but the TV show's crap. You need to get a copy, and yeah, if you can't find a copy, I'll lend you mine, because you will adore it. It's just
Neil Gaiman, right?
Say again.
Is it Neil Gaiman?
Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett together, yeah. And yeah, it's one of the funniest books, and the humor is just sort of like so your type of humor. You will, yeah.
I'll get one. I'll get a copy.
Right. You've recently written your first collection. How does the process of writing for readers differ from the process of writing for the stage or writing for an audience?
So I've tried to circumvent that, actually. So my book is, hopefully, if I get it right, it's going to be like a hybrid. Right. So it's going to have bits written in there. So a lot of every single poem that's in there, every single piece, has an author's note at the end of it. It might only be a line, or it might just be a little bit that I've written, but I've used it as like a gag. So like a lot of them aren't explaining what it's about. It's just me having a joke with you afterwards while slightly explaining it. One of them just says noddy, and that's all it says. But with the idea of the hybrid book is some pieces that are important that I think are like my best pieces, I guess, are going to come with a QR code on another page next to it. And that QR code will link you to an exclusive video of me performing the piece. But also you can have it as an audio bit as well. So then if, say, for example, you do struggle with reading, your neurodiversity is like reading's difficult for you, you can scan that and listen to it instead, or watch it, because as a performer, I don't always think my stuff works well written down. I haven't done it in script form like I would normally in this book. It's more like a standard format. But with some of them that I think really need to be heard or seen, they're going to have a QR code with them with a little video that I'm going to make of me performing it for you, just to sort of cover all bases.
This is my shocked face, as in technology has just gone so fucking far, hasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean,
so the book itself's meant to be like a show. think it's going to be called Admit One. So it's like you're buying a ticket to a show rather than just a book, because I like to try and get everything in there all in one go.
Wow. Well, I'm just blown away by the clever use of technology there, and the fact that that opens it up for audiences, for an audience who are readers and an audience who are viewers as well. You genius, you. You
Well,
um,
on my idea, my publisher worked with me on it, and we spoke about it. So it was both our ideas to do something like that.
it's very very clever, and yeah, I absolutely love it. I can't wait till it's out. Right, so there's a lot of social commentary in your writing. Do you think it's important to use our voice as writers to discuss and educate on important political topics?
Definitely, definitely, because say for example, if we have a somewhat following or whatever, and we can talk about these things, then sure, definitely. I mean, I make no secret of the fact that I'm very anti-Tory. I'm very anti, you know, neoliberalism, capitalism, and this, that, and the other. Although, ironically, we all benefit from it in some ways. But, as a writer, you constantly get told that you have to be professional all the time. Just professional. You have to like have this bridge between you and the audience and this, that, and the other. But I always say, but no, you need to know who I am and what I think, because then you can choose whether or not to engage with me or not. That's up to you then, because I'm not going to hide anything. Because I think when you do hide stuff, as soon as you finally say something, it's like, oh, well, we didn't think they were like that, and you have backlash straight away. And actually, I think if you're just straight up honest about what you believe in and this, that, and the other, then yeah, it's fine. And I think any sort of expression of language will always influence someone, and it will influence someone whether or not that's politically or social economically, or for example with me, Terry Pratchett, I guess, Lemony Snicket, Charlie Brooker. I learned what certain words were because of them. I learned what certain phrases meant because of them, and I learned certain ways of looking at the world because of them. So I think even if you don't mean it, like there's a media theory of simuli simulacra, which is more like the Marx theory, but encoding decoding, where the idea is as an author, I will always encode my worldview into my work, even if it's slightly unintentional. But it depends on the reader and the audience to decode those messages, depending on their demographic. So I think regardless, you're always going to do something like that, because if you write a story about, I don't know, about a person going through hardships, the chances are that hardship you're going to write about is something that you probably have either knowledge of or experience with. And I think by doing that, you're always going to put a little bit of your own opinion in there, even when you try not to.
I fully agree, and yeah, what you're saying about encoding and decoding, I'm 100% behind that as well. I suppose my one worry, and this is something that I worry about with my own writing, is if I go onto a stage and say this is a poem about how much I despise Tories, am I alienating 50% of my audience?
Probably about 48%, to be honest, if the last few years have taught us anything.
Probably
But yeah,
23% after the latest figures, actually, which is
yeah.
Um,
You might be alienating them, but you already feel alienated by their party. So it's like, essentially, you're just trying to say, this is what I disagree with. It's going back to what we were saying before. You're saying this is what I disagree with, and if you can articulate that in such a way which is either agreeable or quite angry, that's your expression. That's you saying something. I think when it comes, if you're doing like against the Tories,
yeah,
your your message or your what you're trying to say is going to be more about the wider issue rather than an individual or an individual group. You're
yeah.
talking about the economics and the social injustice and this, that, and the other of rampant capitalism. So that's what you're really getting down to. And I think people will pick up on that. And I think we think a lot of times people won't, because we're used to very small, and I think it is very, very small experiences that are on like Twitter and this, and they're going, oh, I can't believe it, such and such said this. And you're like, well, actually, the amount of like times that happens is tiny.
Yeah.
we blow it up out of proportion to go like, oh, look, the woke brigade are here now, telling us you can't say chips because it upsets people who like potatoes. Do you know what I mean? Like, that never actually happens. Might happen, might be one event in a shop you've never been to, a shop you'll never go to, and two people you'll never meet. But it'll get blown out of proportion. So I think we're in such a sensationalized world now where in order to push like that sort of agenda, or if you want to use agenda, or you want to use that sort of social movement, or whatever you wish, we find the smallest inconveniences and make them the biggest problem.
Absolutely.
And that's when we start stifling ourselves because we're worried that we are that next small incident. We're all aware of the small incidents, but we try then to apply it to everything in order to sort of stop the app. It's like a bullying tactic, I think, from media outlets, really.
Absolutely. Penultimate question then. Why do you think humour is so important to your writing?
Because without it, I wouldn't be me. Humour is so important to me on a level I can't explain it. It's literally everything to me. And I have been in scenarios where I can't. Straight up, I have no problem with admitting this. I have depression, clinical depression. I take medication for that. And I found that I did during 2018 was a really rough year for me, where I had such a terrible year where I wasn't laughing. And that's when I know there's a problem with me, because I think laughter is a wonderful expression of life. It's the antithesis of a smile. It's the highest point of like joy. You laugh or you cry, and that's theatre. The two masks. It's comedy and tragedy. They go together, and it's like, which one are you going to have? And for me, I'd always go on the side of laughter because life itself is ridiculous. Everything's ridiculous. Everything's ridiculous. Why not just enjoy that and accept that and go with it? Because when you don't do that and you take things far too seriously, you lose the beauty of things, you lose the absurdity of things, and you focus too much on trying to make it logically make sense when so much doesn't. So you might as well have a laugh because at the end of the day, you get one shot at life. And if you spend the whole of it and like constantly trying to deconstruct stuff or constantly being like angry and stuff, without experiencing the idea of laughter and the idea of going, well, that's ridiculous. Why can't I laugh at that? Then I think you're losing out on one of the main aspects of life, and that's to live.
Yeah. I mean, you did almost veer off into a Karen Wall chart there of live, life, love, and laugh. But no, that's just me
You
being
get very deep-eyed about it, don't worry.
no, I'm fully with you on that. And yeah, I think and the humor in your material always works. Right. So final question, Anthony. What are you currently working on, and where can we find more of your work?
So I've currently got a show that I trialed out at the Lancaster Fringe earlier this year called Panic at the Briscoe, and that's like a pun about Panic at the Disco and it's all about being old emo, and it's a lot of all my stuff together, and you get loads of weird stuff in it. I try and put a lot of alternative humour in it. You get a little baby Mr. Blobby in it, and this, that, and the other, because it represents the thing that terrifies me most. So I'm working on that. I'm working on the book, which should hopefully be out in November. We'll see. I don't have a date, but it should be out in November, hopefully. I'm constantly writing new material, filming things, animating things, doing gigs here, there, and everywhere whenever I get a gig. I'm on the BBC. I'm on BBC Radio Manchester this coming Saturday, which will be whatever date it is. I don't know. This is going to be backtracked, so just find a link. I'm going to be on there. So it's just here, there, and everywhere. I've just got gigs coming up this in October. I'm going to be at a brewery on the Liverpool Docklands because I'm at a book launch for another writer called Leon the Pig Farmer, who's amazing. Check him out. It's fantastic. And he's got his new book coming out called Don't Believe the Hype, and I'm going to be at his launch doing a set there for him as well. But you can find me mainly on Instagram, if I'm honest. That seems to be where it's all better to find me. And that's at AB Freelance Artist, because I do other things as well as just
We'll link to that below. Hopefully.
Excellent. Yeah. Live, laugh, love. at AB Freelance Artist. Picture of a minion with an inappropriate quote next to it. Perfect.
Anthony, thank you so much for your time. Much appreciated.